The clash of steel, the roar of waves, and the turbulent tides of history marked the encounters between the Saxons and the Vikings. The Saxons, a Germanic people, inhabited the lands of present-day England, while the Vikings, seafaring warriors from Scandinavia, held a fearsome reputation. These two ancient civilizations stood at odds, locked in a battle for dominance. However, the outcome remained a one-sided affair, as the Saxons repeatedly found themselves on the losing end. This perpetual defeat can be attributed to a symphony of factors orchestrated by fate. Hey, welcome back to History in Minutes. Today, we'll be reaching into the rich tapestry of medieval history, woven with bloodshed and struggle, that tells the tale of the Saxons' perpetual struggle to stem the Viking tide. Reasons for Saxon defeats. The Saxon defeats at the hands of the Vikings were not merely the result of chance, but rather a convergence of strategic advantages held by the Scandinavian invaders. One of the primary factors contributing to their success was the Vikings' unparalleled naval superiority. With their mastery of shipbuilding and navigation, the Vikings possessed vessels that were not only swift and sturdy, but also capable of traversing treacherous waters. This allowed them to strike at will along the coasts, launching surprise attacks on unsuspecting Saxon settlements and swiftly retreating before a formidable defense could be mustered. For example, the Viking raid on Lindisfarne in 793 AD, where they arrived by sea and caught the Saxons completely off guard, represents the devastating impact of their naval prowess. Also, the Vikings' military tactics proved highly effective against the Saxons. They employed raiding and hit-and-run strategies, striking swiftly and disappearing before a significant Saxon force could gather. This tactic not only disrupted Saxon communities, but also sowed fear and uncertainty among the population. Additionally, the Vikings showcased their prowess in cavalry and archery, exploiting these skills to devastating effect in battles against the Saxons. The Battle of Maldon in 991 AD serves as an illustrative example, where the Vikings skillfully combined cavalry charges with ranged attacks to overwhelm the Saxons and secure victory. The Saxon defeats were further exacerbated by their own internal disunity and conflicts. Unlike the Vikings, who were united under strong leadership and a cohesive social structure, the Saxons lacked a unified kingdom or a central authority. Instead, they were fragmented into various tribes and regions, each with its own agendas and rivalries. This disunity weakened their collective response to Viking invasions and made it difficult to coordinate effective defenses. Infighting and disputes among Saxon tribes or regions further distracted their attention and resources, leaving them vulnerable to Viking incursions. In addition to internal disunity, the Saxons also suffered from a lack of preparedness. Their coastal defenses were inadequate, with limited fortifications and early warning systems. This made it easier for the Vikings to launch surprise attacks and exploit Saxon vulnerabilities. Furthermore, the Saxons faced challenges in terms of military resources and training. Compared to the Vikings, who were seasoned warriors with a long tradition of warfare, the Saxons had limited military capabilities and insufficient training to counter the Viking threat. This lack of preparedness left them ill-equipped to anticipate and effectively respond to the swift and merciless Viking incursions. The aftermath of Viking raids. The Viking raids on Saxon territories had profound and far-reaching consequences, leaving a lasting mark on both the economy and the psyche of the Saxons. Economically, the raids inflicted significant damage on the Saxons. Viking invaders would plunder and loot Saxon settlements, seizing valuable resources, treasures, and livestock. This not only resulted in the immediate material losses, but also created a climate of insecurity that disrupted trade and agricultural activities. Saxon farmers and merchants faced constant threats, leading to a decline in productivity and a reluctance to engage in commerce. The cumulative effect of these raids weakened the Saxon economy, causing economic stagnation and hindering the development of their society. The cultural and psychological impact of Viking raids on the Saxons can't be overstated. The Vikings struck with ruthless efficiency, instilling fear and psychological trauma among the Saxon population. The unpredictability of the raids created a pervasive sense of insecurity and vulnerability, with Saxons living in constant fear of the next Viking incursion. This psychological toll was compounded by the loss of lives and the destruction of Saxon settlements, resulting in the displacement of communities and the uprooting of families. Not only this, but the Viking raids led to the loss of cultural heritage, and the destruction of religious sites. Saxons witnessed the desecration of their sacred spaces, such as monasteries and churches, which were targeted by the Vikings for their wealth and religious significance. The Lindisfarne Monastery, renowned for its religious and intellectual importance, was pillaged by the Vikings in 793 AD, symbolizing the assault on Saxon religious and cultural institutions. Interestingly, alongside the devastation caused by the Viking raids, there was also an unintended cultural exchange between the Saxons and the Vikings. The prolonged contact between the two groups led to a gradual blending of cultures. The Saxons, exposed to Viking customs and practices, inevitably absorbed elements of Viking culture. This influence can be seen in areas such as language, art, and social customs, where Viking influences began to merge with Saxon traditions. The Saxons' response and adaptability. In the face of relentless Viking invasions, the Saxons were not resigned to perpetual defeat. They responded to the Viking threat with resilience and adaptability, implementing various strategies to resist and counter the Viking onslaught. One significant response was the construction of burhs, fortified towns strategically positioned across Saxon territories. These burhs served as strongholds, offering protection and a centralized defense against Viking raids. They were typically equipped with defensive walls, watchtowers, and garrisons to repel Viking incursions. The establishment of a network of burhs created a system of interconnected defense, enabling Saxons to coordinate their efforts and respond more effectively to Viking attacks. The most famous example of a burh is the city of Alfred the Great, which later became known as Winchester, demonstrating the Saxons' commitment to fortifying their settlements. Recognizing the need for collective strength, the Saxons sought alliances and collaborations with neighboring kingdoms and rulers. They understood that a unified front was essential to resist the Viking invaders. Saxons reached out to powerful neighboring rulers, such as the King of Wessex, seeking military support and forming coalitions against the common Viking enemy. These alliances bolstered the Saxon defense and created a formidable force capable of challenging Viking advances. The alliances with other kingdoms, such as Mercia and Isangalia, allowed the Saxons to regain lost territories and mount successful counteroffensives against the Vikings. To match the Vikings' military prowess, the Saxons underwent military reforms so they could improve their capabilities and training. They recognized the effectiveness of Viking tactics and strategies and adopted them as their own. Saxon forces began to incorporate cavalry charges, archery, and raiding tactics into their military repertoire. By assimilating Viking military practices, the Saxons sought to level the playing field and exploit the tactics that had brought the Vikings success in the first place. This adaptation allowed the Saxons to mount more effective defenses and launch counterattacks against the Vikings. Moreover, the Saxons also employed a strategy of Christianization and consolidation. They recognized the potential of religion as a unifying force and sought to convert Viking leaders to Christianity. By embracing Christianity, Viking leaders could be integrated into the Saxon social and political fabric, reducing the threat of further Viking invasions. The conversion of Viking leaders not only facilitated diplomatic relationships, but also contributed to the strengthening of Saxon unity. Christianization provided a common religious and political framework that helped bind together disparate Saxon tribes and regions, enabling them to present a more unified front against Viking incursions. The end of Viking invasions. The Viking Age, characterized by their fierce raids and conquests, eventually came to an end as a culmination of various factors. The weakening of Viking power played a crucial role in bringing an end to their invasions. Firstly, there was a decline in Viking raids and settlements. The frequency and intensity of their raids on Saxon territories decreased. This decline allowed the Saxons to regroup and strengthen their defenses. Internal conflicts among Viking factions further contributed to the weakening of their power. Rivalries and power struggles among Viking leaders diverted their attention and resources away from further invasions. The internal strife fragmented their unity, enabling the Saxons to exploit the divisions among the Viking factions. Saxon resistance and counterattacks also played a significant role in bringing an end to the Viking invasions. The Saxons successfully defended against Viking attacks, repulsing their incursions and inflicting significant losses on Viking forces. The Battle of Edington in 878 AD, led by Alfred the Great, stands as a notable example of a Saxon victory, where they decisively defeated the Viking army of Guthrum. More successful counterattacks followed, gradually retaking territories that had been lost to the Vikings. The recapture of territories like York by the Saxons marked a turning point in the conflict. Through their resilience and determination, the Saxons managed to reclaim their lands and re-establish their authority over Viking-conquered regions. The ultimate demise of Viking invasions came with the Norman conquest in 1066. The Normans, led by William the Conqueror, invaded England and defeated the remaining Viking forces. This invasion marked the final defeat of the Vikings and their independent rule of England. The Norman conquest also led to the establishment of a unified English kingdom under Norman rule, bringing together the Saxon and Norman cultures. In the end, both parties experienced their highs and lows, their triumphs and downfalls that shaped each and every one of them. This ends today's video. If you learned something new, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content worth your every minute.